I do think this is one of those days where there is a ton going on, and some of it is the pot boiler that is what's happening domestically and also internationally. First, the legal cases for Donald Trump. Appeals court is now saying that Trump can keep control over the California National Guard troops. As you know, the troops were deployed to LA following protests over the immigration raids. There was opposition from Governor Newsom, also opposition from Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass. And the typical way in which troops would be deployed would be through the governor's request. Even the president generally would work through the governor or in conjunction with the governor. In this case, they bigfooted the governor. They view the governor of California and the mayor of Los Angeles as impediments to a policy that they feel must be implemented. These, I'm going to call them cruel, deliberately cruel, brutal ICE raids that are occurring all over Southern California. They're occurring in restaurants. They're taking place on soccer fields. They're taking place in agricultural regions where so many are there to pick the harvest. So it's and deliberately cruel to have the chilling effect, right? The stories around these ICE detentions are both heartbreaking and also sobering. I'll give you the sobering part first. The detention centers are apparently horrible when it comes to health standard, when it comes to the number of people being parked there, stored there, warehoused there. And now they are requiring the congressional leadership that wants in to inspect these various detention centers. DHS, Department of Homeland Security, in the form of Christine Nome, is saying if you want to inspect these places, great, we need 72 hours notice. And we also have the complete ability and option to decline your visit even after we've approved it. In other words, once the 72nd hour rolls around and you're there to move in and see what's going on and inspect it, we can always pull that authorization. Again, guys, this represents a real change in America. This is a change and a flavor of America that nobody voted for. I understand that overwhelmingly the immigration issue is what propelled Trump to power, immigration and inflation. Mm-hmm. But what was masquerading as the border issue is actually a despicably cruel and aggressive immigration deportation policy that is taking up workers who are a vital part of the American economy and also represent, in the main, complete law-abiding residents of this country. In other words, they are taking, by overwhelming numbers, those who aren't violent criminals, don't have a criminal history, don't have any gang affiliations. They're taking those who are working quite earnestly in jobs across the occupational spectrum, everything from agricultural workers to fashion workers to, seamstresses, landscapers, and even those who aren't in the workforce. Where's the story about the 19-year-old? Let me just read this to you quickly. I could read so many stories like this. A 19-year-old named Emerson Colindres, supposed to be a routine check-in for him with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then it was a trap. 19 years old, never returned home. No. Came to the United States with his family more than a decade ago. He wasn't even 10 years old when he came here to escape violence in Honduras. He was detained by ICE on June 4th, days after this talented student and soccer player graduated from high school in Cincinnati, Ohio. His teammates said he was one of the greatest players they met on the field. Dreamed of continuing his sports career, hoped to attend a university. He didn't have a criminal record. In the span of 2 weeks, he went from celebrating his graduation to being detained by ICE and then being deported to a country he has not lived in since he was 8 years old. I mean, he's not the only law abiding high school student who's been targeted by ICE. They are everywhere. They swept up students in New York City, in Milford, Massachusetts, in Riverside, California. This is wrong.
I saw a story out of Southern California that these gardeners were snatched while they were mowing the lawn.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if they, drove by looking for yard workers or what. It happened Thursday. The folks were mowing the lawn outside of a house in Ontario, California, and the neighbors witnessed this man being taken into custody. They called the homeowner and said your gardener was just taken. They apparently left the lawnmower running right there on the front lawn, threw the gardener's phones in their in the work truck along with the car keys to the work truck, left everything open and just took off. That's it.
It is so horribly brutal what's happening, and it's clearly in response to a quota and a command from Miller. You heard for a moment that Trump seemed to get clarity on how damaging it would be to the American economy when he said, we're going to stay away from those businesses concerned with agriculture. We're going to stay away from those businesses concerned with tourism, hotel business. But then quickly changed, and the next day was, no, we're going to go after everything actually just as aggressively, if not more aggressively. That was after a conversation with Steve Bannon and Stephen Miller, apparently. But it is grotesque, and it's un-American. And these people come here, and they may be potentially the best of America, and now they're being deported. And it does seem disproportionately the Latino community is being affected. There was that story about the LA Dodgers not letting ICE in. I mean, 40% of their fan base is Latino. So you understand how the Dodgers can feel responsible to their fan base on some level. I mean, those who, help buoy that franchise. But that was a gutsy move. It was late in coming. I mean, when ICE first moved into Los Angeles in the heavy-handed way that they have, and now with National Guard and Marines and all this other stuff, the Dodgers were quiet, but now it appears that the Dodger organization at least is saying something. So there's that.
I saw this story about Latino voters many of whom supported Trump. And this focus group that was done, I think by NBC, showed that Latino Trump voters are feeling differently about deportations than the MAGA people. But even so, they still are backing Trump. So they might not agree with the deportation thing and what's happening, but they're not pulling their support.
Well, send me that piece. I mean, I think I'm seeing a lot of it on one level. But I always like to see those polls and like to see even anecdotal stuff like that. I mentioned to you when I was on the radio in Los Angeles, it was less than a week ago, got a caller who said, I voted for Trump. I'm married to a woman who is not an American citizen. That was a little weird because if you're married, you should be. Maybe he said I'm with my longtime partner, whatever he might have said. I thought he said I'm married to, but anyway, he said, but now he's gone too far. He said, I voted for Trump, but this is just too much. And this is excessive, pretty much by any yardstick. But it is, I'd suggest these deportations, and if you look at, who's being deported, I told you about the soccer player, it's devastating. It's devastating to read these stories. It's absolutely devastating. And I mentioned to you, my friend who's been in this country for 30 years, she's here illegally. That is to say, without proper documentation. She told me that they moved into an entire apartment building, ICE did, and took everybody. I mentioned that to you yesterday. So, and then she said that, and in other buildings in her area, they've done similar things. It's too much. Breaking fake news, says Trevor Starr in Hollywood, effective immediately. All drinks at Dodger Stadium will be served with no ice. I get it. No ice. Yes. All right. Yes. Thank you for the 1010 super chat. Noe Marie, hadn't heard from her in a second. $10 super chat. She says, please reach out to immigration law expert Naomi Rod Ariaza of UC San Francisco Law. USA policies lead to problems in Honduras and Guadalajara specifically that have led to an influx of immigrants. I don't know if you mean Guadalajara, Mexico. Interesting. Will you note that, Kim? Maybe we can get in touch with Naomi.
I will.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Always appreciate, we try to, if you suggest somebody for a booking, we look into it and try to make it happen. So thanks for that. That's just a quick look at this wildly aggressive immigration policy, which again, and this is the last thing, I just want to kind of bookend my thought about this so it underscores something. The border is what really won the day with Trump. The border policy, if you will, the open border of the libs, of the socialists, of the Biden administration, etc. There was a stream of immigrants coming across that southern border, particularly, right? So when you then take an aggressive immigration policy, and aggressive immigration policy is almost, I'm halting because it's almost too kind a way to describe it. It's a malevolent, aggressive, wanton, utterly cruel immigration policy where you're grabbing everybody who looks Latino and you're grabbing them in the most aggressive, brutal fashion. That is a distinctly different thing from the border policy. The southern border policy, which again propelled this guy to the presidency, is being conflated with the immigration policy of this country, and you end up with everyone kind of scratching their heads. Oh, I voted to stop the flow of immigrants into the southern border. I didn't vote for Pedro, the 15-year-old who's lived next door for 10 years, came here when he was 5, to be dragged by his collar into a white van by a bunch of guys who are disguised in black outfits with no markings whatsoever, and we never hear from Pedro again. This is being played out over and over and over again, and it is un-American. It is absolutely a change in American policy. And these people have no linkage, repeatedly, time and time again, no linkage to any criminal element or gang-affiliated activity. That's not who they're going after. You don't get gang members at Home Depot, mother effers. You don't get gang members raiding some kitchen. This is a bogus BS policy. And you lean in with your fake military crap. Kristi Noem with her cosplay, wearing her outfit, making these pronouncements. We're here to liberate Los Angeles. What, from the 4 blocks of disturbance in downtown Los Angeles? Are there bigger disturbances when the Lakers win a championship or win just their division? There are bigger demonstrations when the Dodgers win the World Series. You don't send the National Guard or Kristi Noem or the Marines during that crap. It's obscene. And these ICE agents are clearly being instructed to be deliberately cruel because they are going out there. There they are. Look at them with all their camo, hiding their faces.
That's Kristi Noem there in the front of that house.
Yeah, leading, but look at the guy on the left. Can't tell who he is.
No.
Just says police.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and if ever there was a situation that set up the kind of abduction you can get away with by just putting police on some part of your outfit, even if you want to do that, you don't even have to do that. You can just fake police your way into abducting whoever you want. These are scary times, and they're being enabled by this woman here and this policy here. It's absolutely, and when I see something like this, John Smith says, this is part of a bigger effort. You have to think of the long game. I agree. It serves several masters, to use the phrase, right? It serves the immediate, which is just, I think, a racist policy. I don't think it's underpinned by any, they're a drag on the economy. No, these are people, this workforce is paying taxes, and they're not getting benefits, and they don't vote. So I don't understand this, they're coming here, the Democrats want them for their vote. Their vote? They don't vote. They're not here legally. How can they vote?
They can't.
And the other thing is, they don't want to go anywhere near a place where there are officials of the government because they're here illegally. But again, it's a gray area.
Yeah.
It's a gray area because they're such a big part of the American economy. So, but again, the long game can also have to do with dominating blue cities, occupying blue states, an occupation force that has a feeble excuse to move into these regions and then stays there. There is a dominance that is established by control of the military, and you're seeing that flex also. So, and if you're counting on the courts to save you, Kim just mentioned that or maybe I mentioned it. I can't keep track of who mentions what on this show. But we just told you that the courts say, hey, Trump's allowed to have control of the National Guard.
Which is really scary because we were talking to David Katz yesterday, a former federal prosecutor and now defense attorney in Los Angeles. And he was saying that, that he was hopeful. He didn't think it would happen, but he was hopeful that this ruling wouldn't come down this way, that the judges would have some, be able to look into the future a little bit and see what this means for other cities, other states in the United States, and how this could be used in a really bad, sinister way. So it's frustrating because if he can keep control of the National Guard in California, it means he can do it across the United States, right?
Exactly. And I think that's what, when that commenter was saying, playing a long game, I think that's exactly what is in play here, Citizen Swain says they already face discrimination because of their non-legal status. People get them to work and then don't pay them or pay them less than promised. To jump in on the least successful among us is just beyond. Exactly. I mean, it is true. And you find that also across the board in different businesses. I'm remembering, and I think I may have made this point before, but I'll just quickly make it again. You'll remember during COVID how the slaughterhouses became, they call them meat packing plants, I think. They found that the word slaughter, it just doesn't brand well. Yeah, it just doesn't. The branding, can we change the name? Slaughter is just so on the nose.
Just maybe sounds really rough.
Call it meat processing, something like that. So the meat processing plants, they were these festering cauldrons of COVID-19. And people were getting sick, and it was really effing them up. And so they didn't go to work. And President Trump, this is season 1 of the Trump presidency, first 4 years, right? He forced them open, called them essential workers, and also indemnified the owners of these slaughterhouses / meat processing plants from any legal action that might result from forcing the workers back into, as I've mentioned, this festering pot of COVID-19, which was the inside of these slaughterhouses. I mean, just because of the proximity with which they work next to each other and the way that these plants are set up, I guess the COVID-19 transmission rate was just way off the scale. Yeah. So you consider them essential work. And by the way, everybody got sick. It was a horror show.
And most of them were Latino folks.
Yes, thank you. And that's
Mhm.
kind of the point, that they are Latino and they are also here undocumented.
Mhm.
And that is the backbone of the meat processing slaughterhouse world. Okay. And it's funny that on the one hand, you consider them essential workers, you force them back to work in a situation that will likely make them sick, and now you're plucking them out of their apartment house and you're sending them to some gulag. It's horrible, and it's unacceptable, and it's un-American, and bravo for all of those who push back on this. It's a real reckoning at this moment in this country.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Meantime, here is Luis who says, these are all the Dodgers players, half the team, he says. Do you want to read this, Albert? You are the commissioner. This is a comment related to the baseball team, the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Yeah, Teoscar Hernandez, Kiki Hernandez, Shohei Ohtani, Roki, all of them. The Dodgers probably have the most impressive roster, and they're almost completely, even their first baseman, Freddie Freeman, who looks like he's just a normal white guy, is from Canada. So
Mhm.
they're actually almost all completely immigrants. So
And so what is he saying? Do you want to read the
have our
comment?
teams are foreign born. Good thing all can just purchase that 5 million Trump gold card.
Yeah, that's right.
To
Just
buy
to get a
their
citizenship for the 5 million. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. It's hashtag American way. Thank you, Luis. Ain't it true?
Can we roll back for just a moment about when we're talking about the National Guard and how the appeals court says, yeah, Trump can federalize the National Guard, and the governor doesn't need, of whatever state, doesn't really need to say, we'd like your help. Trump can just take control and it's okay. The thinking is that possibly this is how he takes control during the next election.
Right. There are a couple of ways in which he could affect the next election. First of all, I'm leaving out the technical manipulation, which I feel had something to do with the last election. I don't believe that Trump carried 7 swing states. I just don't believe it. I think that there is enough evidence that's coming to the surface, and it ranges from good old-fashioned voter suppression to data manipulation. And we are going to get into this in the weeks ahead on this channel, so I hope you'll catch that episode, and of course we'll drop it as a separate video. But the other way in which you can influence election is you can put a lot of cops, Marines, Army members, members of the military on the streets to protect the various polling stations. These are things that are intimidating, especially now when you see the wide berth that these guys are given to just pick up anybody. I mean, they're arresting and throwing down to the pavement as they arrest them and zip tie them American citizens. I mean, legislators. So all of a sudden, it's like, I don't even want to leave the house, man. These guys are out of their minds. They've been, we identified one of them as a Proud Boy. I mean, this is, in part anyway, guys who kind of get off on the violence. And so I'm not looking forward to that period around the election during which I think we will see this presence that you're talking about. So I see all of these ways in which you can suppress the vote and influence the vote. If that's what you're getting at, I mean, I completely agree. Yeah.
Well, there's what's to stop him from seizing voting machines? They said there's something wrong with the voting machines last time, right? Tried to send police in there to isolate the voting machines or whatever. I mean, they could do anything if they have the National Guard in every single state federalized. I don't know. My mind goes to dark places, Mark.
It's true. And just to kind of round out that point on the voting machines, as you're aware, those voting machines in a couple of cases were surrendered. In a couple of cases of 2 different states were surrendered to people who really didn't even have any kind of official capacity. They were kind of involved in their own independent investigation. Anyway, and in an official investigation. Point being, they surrendered with those machines, coding and software specifics and details all of which was jacked, and then it was laid out on the internet, so anybody could get access to it. So we've always kind of felt state by state, because it's not a federalized election, it's 50 different elections. We've always felt in a way safer because these things aren't necessarily easily manipulated because all of these states do it differently. But increasingly you're seeing an open door to a lot of corruption even with the American elections. And I think we've seen it in the last election, and I think we're going to see it again in all the ways that you just described. They can seize voting machines in districts where it looks like Trump's going to lose. They can seize voting machines in places where it looks like the GOP candidate is going to lose. I mean, the GOP is pretty ruthless right now. And if you are GOP, I'm not necessarily talking about you. I'm talking about I'm going to give you credit for perhaps caring about certain things from a policy standpoint that rubbed you the wrong way about the Democrats. Maybe you were pushing back against wokeism. Maybe you were pushing back against a lot of concepts that you felt were being too aggressively laid on the American public. I'm talking about everything, cultural wedge issues, So maybe that motivated you to register as GOP or vote GOP. But what I'd suggest now is that those who are in charge, to Kim's point, will do anything to retain power. And that we are seeing in more and more aggressive ways, and that may include seizing voting machines in the next election.
We tried to do it last time, so what's to it's not a stretch that it could try to do it again.
Yeah. How do we escape the irony that Dems' big argument and due process is what we need these immigrants, and is that we need these immigrants and who will work in exploitive conditions, by the way. Thank you, Knowing Marie, the $5 super chat. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of making that point with the meat processing place. I mean, you need people there to work both there in the agricultural fields, et cetera, and Americans aren't doing those jobs. And, again, you can crash parts of the economy this way, and I think Trump doesn't care, especially if it's a blue city. But these are big constituencies, and I would just say one last thing when it comes to California, particularly when it comes to agriculture. Vilma says, and I'll get to it in a second, where is my American Cesar Chavez? Immigrants need someone like Cesar Chavez to speak for them because immigrants can't. Thank you, Vilma, for the $5 super chat. Look, they just arrested Huerta, is it? The union leader in Los Angeles, right, David? And he's a huge union leader. So when you say, where's your Chavez, that he really is sort of, I don't want to say I put him on the level of Chavez, but he was and is a real shining light to many union workers. That's why that detaining of that man was so damaging, I think.
David Huerta, president of the SEIU, arrested June 6th while he was acting as a community observer, now faces charges for allegedly impeding federal officers during this operation.
Sure, that's the way they do it. They go, if you're just observing, if you're just around, you're impeding, you're obstructing. And so, again, this guy is not Chavez, but he is a luminary. He is a high-profile figure in the working class communities of Latinos across the healthcare industry, across the service industry. So I think this did mobilize a lot of union workers. The problem is they are hell-bent, this administration, on pushing this policy through with a Marine presence, with a National Guard presence, and with local officials on some level being overwhelmed by the Fed's presence. I mean, ICE I think they are the new Gestapo. I'm sorry. They have Gestapo tactics, and I hate to use these analogs and these parallels to Nazi Germany, but I think they are like the Stasi. They arrest first, and they do it in a brutal takedown way, and they ask questions later. And we've seen it happen. I mean, in the earliest days of this, which was not long ago, they deported a bunch of people to El Salvador, to a notorious prison, many of whom had done nothing. They even admit that they deported a bunch of people by mistake, but they didn't want to bring them home. They brought one of them back. So It's concerning. All right. I need to move on to got to get to the, if we don't have, I didn't see that. If we don't have, anyway.
No, we don't have secure voting. Everything we talk about is useless because we all go vote and it doesn't count.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think, as I said, the vote is already something that's very threatened in this country and has been in many ways historically for as long as we've had a vote. Right? First, they exclude blacks, and only white people can vote. Only white landowners can vote. And only men can vote. Right? I mean, you just go back as long as you want. You can find ways in which the vote has been suppressed, and we always feel as though, well, we're evolving toward one person, one vote. But not really. There's always the effort to suppress the vote, reducing the number of voting places, right? Polling places. That happened across Texas. And we've seen just the ways in which they've stripped the ability to vote away from people, and they continue to do it. And this is the agenda of the GOP, particularly. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
also wanted to talk about what's going on in Iran. By the way, J.D. Vance is going to travel to L.A., apparently. We don't hear much from J.D. Vance, but nice that he's jumping on board, too. Hey, Marines and National Guard and, everybody else is there. Why not add J.D. Vance into the toxic brew that is the crew that is in Los Angeles?
He's going to come deliver a speech. We needed that,
Yeah, we are one speech away from feeling good about life. That's exactly right. By the way, a judge is blocking the Trump plan to tie transportation funds to immigration enforcement. So there is that. Yeah. And, Trump has basically said, hey, you don't play ball with immigration, we're going to pull all the transportation money from you.
Right.
Judge is saying, no, cannot do that. And the appeals court, just because to round out the legal side, the appeals court in the E. Jean Carroll case is saying that Trump, this is such a sleazy, but it's such a classic Trumpian move. He cannot move the case to the federal government in such a way that the American taxpayer pays the $83 million defamation judgment. Yeah. So it was a panel of judges on the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals denying his request to have the Justice Department lawyers argue in his appeal on this defamation case. He wanted no more, is it my lawyers and on my dime? I want the power of the U.S. Justice Department to handle this for me. So again, he's ordered to pay $83.3 million in damages for defaming E. Jean Carroll in 2019 when he denied her accusation that he sexually assaulted her and, called her a liar and all these other things that are associated with defamation. But now he'll have to take care of that case alone. I don't think he's got any problem coming up with the money. He's got the meme coin. He's got billions of dollars. He's got money flowing in from all of these sources into that world of crypto and beyond. He has all the contributions that have been funneled into the Trump organization and into his pockets because people want to get the president's attention and they want to play ball with the president. He's got many, many businesses internationally that are now enriching him in ways that he had never even calculated in his first term. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.